Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to cover chapter 5, the first part of it, designing forms and reports. Well, this is part of the design phase. We did so far the database design, and the other activity in this course, it will be the designing forms and reports. Of course, the architecture design, which is the third one, that one is, we already cover it in software engineering. So far we've done in this class the following. After introduction in chapter 1, we went to chapter 5 and we did the planning phase. We determined what really the scope, boundaries we need. We create the context diagram and all the stakeholders and external entity around it, the people who interact with the system. Then we found about, the feasibility of that. Is it feasible or not? Then we went there and we found out what kind of risk we could have. We determined the timetable and some rough estimate, and we create the Gantt chart. That is the last thing in the planning. We went to the analysis. We determined the requirement. We gather requirement. We come up with many different techniques to collect requirement. Then we went there and we tried to structure the requirement. We did the process modeling. We did the context diagram, data flow diagrams in all levels, level 0, level 1, etc. Then we went to the logic modeling. We did the 3 different models: pseudocode model, decision table, and decision tree. And the last things in the analysis phase, it was the ARD, the data conceptual modeling. So we construct the entity relationship diagram. So in the previous chapter, we started the design phase and we did the database design. And now we are going to talk about the forms and reports design. What are the learning objectives here, in this chapter? So we have to explain the process of designing forms and reports and what are the deliverables of this, of the creation of those form and report. Apply general guidelines. There are some guidelines, and this is the important thing here, how really we design it and what are those guidelines we need to follow in order to format the forms and report to come up with a professional document. And probably, in the exam, probably we could give you, an example of form, and you could really been asked that if there is any problem, what kind of problems, and that form, which it is the guidelines, which it is not really used in that form or that report. Then we are going to use the color and see how really the color, how important the color to improve the usability of those documents. Then in next lecture, we are going to cover the format, text, table, list, whatever, and how those really reflected in an effective way. Then we'll go and we have more objective to explain how to assess usability and describe how variation in user, task, technology, and environmental characteristic influence the usability of form and report. So what may really make the customer like the forms and report if they really use them? And we could find out, many different ways to see or to figure out if really the user uses these document forms and reports, and what really they are, what they like about them and what they don't like, in order to put these, in the future project. Discuss the guideline for the design of forms and report for Internet Electronic Commerce System. As we just did, a few minutes ago, we went through the system development lifecycle, and now we are in the design phase. We've done so far the planning, then we went through the analysis, and now we are in the design. We did the database design and form and reports design. This is the chapter we are covering now. Dialogue and distributed, no, those one we are not gonna really cover them in this class. Then after that we go to the implementation, and by that time we end the development cycle. And if we go through the maintenance, which it is, we are going to cover the maintenance chapter, because we still have two chapters, one of them implementation and the other one is maintenance. And by that time we finish the whole system development life cycle. Well, as we said, the designing of forms and reports is really a process, is really a user-focused activity that typically follows a prototyping approach. During this process, the type of question, all the type of question, the W4H, which it is the W4, which it means the question, which it is the who, the where, the what, and the when. And the H is the how. All these questions, it should be answered in order to find out, who's going to use the customer, where it's going to be used, how, etc. We start with the form. The form, it's a business document that contains some predefined data and may include some area where additional data are to be filled. An instance of a form is typically based on one database record. ليس بالضرورة. It is يعني it doesn't have to be, probably it's more than that an instance of probably two different databases. What do you mean by business document that contains some predefined data? The form is like, if you want to go and enroll yourself like in a university, or you want to apply for any kind of job, whatever, they give you a form. And the form, it has some predefined data, like the name, whatever, but you have to fill the information with that. By filling this one, we call that this is really an active thing. It's not really a passive like the report. The report, it's a passive document, but here it is an active document, so you have to react to it. When you see the name, you have to put the name. When you see the age, you have to put the age. So it has some predefined data. Report typically contains data from many unrelated records or transactions. It's a business document that contains only predefined data. So that's why we call it. It is a passive document used solely for reading or reviewing data. So you don't really act to it. In the same document, probably you could really act or react to it, but we have to go to a form. You see a report, you find there is a problem in the report, or you have to update a database. You don't update the database in the report itself, but probably you get some information, some note, and then you go to another program in order to update or the database according to what's the problem in that report. So that's why we call it, it's a passive document. A report typically contains data from many unrelated records or a transaction. Common types of report, what type of reports? We have a schedule report, regularly produce a daily, a weekly, a monthly, whatever, a predefined time interval for routine information needs. Like a daily report, a monthly report, we have a weekly report, we have a yearly reports. Key indicator provides summary of a critical information on regular basis. Well, actually, probably the key indicator it comes underneath the schedule, which it is like quarterly. Like every quarter, we accumulate how much we sell, how much we buy, the cost, the price, etc., etc. The exception report highlights data outside of normal operating ranges. If you have a problem, anything which is outside the normal thing, we create an exception report. Drill down provides a detail behind summary of a key indicator or exception report. Drill down, you have to go through many different levels. like from the database, from the root to the children, to all these relation, between the databases. You have to drill down through them. Like example, which is really we talk about, in some chapter. I mean, if you want to look at all the parts are part of that engine. When you go and you take the engine and you drill down through it, you explode it to the first level, to the assembly, and then sub-assembly, until you get the lowest thing, which it is the component, which it is like, it is not explodable. It's a unique component. It is that part. That's the one, we could create. Ad hoc, it is respond to unplanned request for a non-routine information needs. Well, right away it comes, to the manager, at 10 o'clock. Well, he tell you, well, give me a report, which it is how much we sold so far this month, how much, how many, the quantity we bought from that part or that item, from the first of the year, etc. Well, what's the process of designing form and report? Well, it is a user-focused activity. That's what really we just defined it at the beginning of this lecture. So what's that mean? It follows a prototyping approach. In the design process in general, the user has really nothing to say about, like, when you want architecture design. What is it? The design, it is abstract machine or repository or client server, whatever. You don't ask the customer for that one, because the customer is not technical. This is your decision. As a technical person, you decide what type of design you have to apply in order to fulfill the requirement for the customer. Here, there is a part of it, in the form and the report. I think there is a part of it which it is probably related to the customer. So you could really ask the customer to get, like, you start with the initial version of that design, and then you ask him what he or she thinks about it, and you could really go through the steps of designing that one. It's like, a prototyping approach. You change until we reach an agreement with the customer. That is the way it should look, the report or the form in that system. First step are to gain an understanding of that intended user and task objective by collecting initial requirement during requirement determination. So we have to find out what the requirement of the customer, what really he want to see, what all these items, and we try to accumulate them and put them together, in a specific report or form. Well, we need to ask a few questions to find out, about the forms and the report, in order to find out, what kind of information, the period, or how many times we're gonna run that program, daily, weekly, monthly, the intervals of it. So we have to ask who will use the form or report, who's the originator, who's the owner of that one, what is the purpose of the form or report, when is the report needed or used, where does the form or report need to be delivered and used, how many people need to use or review the form or report. So there are a lot of questions, to get more information, to see which is, as we said, who, what, when, where, all these kind questions we need to get answer for them in order to create a form or report most effective and usable. Well, as I did explain just earlier, what's the process? First of all, we have initial prototype is designed from requirement. We create initial version of that form or report. Then we review it with the customer. User review the prototype design, either accept it as is or request a change. Well, if you add that, so they request a change, we did the change, and then we went through it again. If changes are requested, the construction, evaluation, refinement cycle is repeated. We construct it, we evaluate it, If there is any changes, suggested by the customer or whatever, we refine it and then again construct it, evaluation, refinement, until we get to the final thing, which it is be accepted by both them and us. Well, a coding sheet is an old tool for designing form and reports. Of course, before the era of technology, they used to use a coding sheet. The coding sheet, we call it here, I don't know if you know about it or not. We used to buy back in the 60s and 70s sheets for, we call it دفتر هندسة. It has, as you're gonna see it in the next slide, it has a small circle. Each little circle in that sheet represent like one not one word, one letter or a number or whatever it is, and then we'll see it now. Usually associated with a text-based form and report for mainframe application. Visual Basic and other development tools provide a computer-aided GUI form and report generation. So now with the Visual Basic, there are some tools, to do it online, electronically. You change whatever, and it's easy to use, better than the good old days, which it is having the coding sheet. And this is the coding sheet, the one we talk about, This is the دفتر الهندسة اللي just I talk about them, in order to make the indentation is good. Look at the name of the report, customer information, and then underneath there the customer number, it is indented. Then you go there and you find the name and then address, city, all these, and the column there, all of them, they come underneath each other with in the same square and the same column. And it helped us, in this way, used to help us. And actually, really, back in the 70s, we don't really use it, but the people in the 70s and the 60s, they used to use this one before we get, the latest technology, which it has helped us designing this easily. Because, if you have a problem with this, and you try to erase it, and you'll see that the paper either, it's become gushy, whatever, then you just throw it away and you start all over, then this is really a problem, and it will take a longer time. Well, if you compare the coding sheet with this one, wow, this is really a big difference. If you look at that input screen designed in Microsoft Visual Basic, it's easy to design. You could see easily the indentation. You could look at really all these, the attribute, the name there, and the address, the city, the state, the zip, all of them, indented in this way, left justify or right justified, whatever. It is easy to look at. It's lookable, no density, etc. So the page design here, or the form or the report design here, it is really clear. It's not really معجق. It is not really clutter with all these things, and you could see it right away on the spot. You could change it because you work with the technology, not on paper and pencil. Well, what is the deliverable and outcome of this one? Of course, design specification are the major deliverable and input to the system implementation phase. Because, we take the deliverable from this phase and we go, the next phase is the implementation. So the outcome here is, the form and report, the one we are going to use them in the program. Of course, another thing, deliverable, which it is not just, you design the report and the form. I think you have to somehow document. You have to have some documentation, which it is like you have to have a narrative overview. Characterizes the user, the task, system, and environmental factors. You have to put some wording with that, document, if it is either a report or form. You have to include a sample design image of the form from the coding sheet or from building development tool. You print it and you put it there, as a document. And testing and usability assessment, measuring test or usability result, consistency, sufficiency, accuracy, etc., as we are going to talk about the assessment of usability at the end of this chapter. Well, formatting forms and reports. All the design technique we are going to use, all the attribute we're gonna include in this report, they're gonna play a big role in the assessing of the usability. If the report or the form contains all the information the customer wants, if it is designed in a user-friendly way, and we'll later on explain what's that mean, I think it will be used by the customer a lot. First of all, it has to have a meaningful title. The title of the report or the form. It's use a clear, specific version information and current date. The title and the form, I mean, when you look at the form, if you look at printout of form, whatever, you go down and you see in the lower corner, either right or left one, something written in a very, very small letter. And it has probably rev, which it is the last revision of it, like revised on October 2019. You could say rev 10 to 19, or probably just the year revision, or it's this one revised, the last revision of it 2019. Why? Because as always the report or the forms, especially the form, they always change to them. If you look at, sometimes, and if you go to some institution or some company, whatever, and then they give you a form, and the form you have to fill it out and probably give it to another institution, like some of the health company forms, whatever. Sometimes they change the form. It has more attribute, more fields on it, and the previous form, it will be invalid. So they don't really use the previous form. Meaningful information include only necessary information with no need to modify. Another important thing in designing the form and report, balancing layout. Use adequate spacing, margin, and clear labels. Don't make the report or form clutters, معجق, in other words, with a lot of information there. This will really increase the the usability of that system, of that report or form. Easy navigation system. Show how to move forward and backward and where you are currently. I mean, if it is a printout, you should show the current page. Then you could say the history of it, or this is like page 10 of 20. If it is online, you could see the number of the page, and then you could see an arrow go to the right or to the left. If it is the first page on that report, you just see the arrows go to the right, which it is to the next, second, third, fourth, whatever. So this is really very important items used when designing these forms and reports. Well, as we said, we have to follow some guidelines. Well, this example, 10.5, you could see how poorly is designed this form is. You look at the title, it's a vague title, customer information. What do you mean customer information? You look at the field, they are not really indented. You look at those number, 22,000, 13,000, whatever, and you could see there is no indentation. There is no left justified or justified as we release here. No summary to see, what's really these numbers are. No navigation information. We don't know this is what page. Is there is another page after or before? What's that? So there is a lot of problem with this example. Probably we'll give you a question. We bring a question in a test and we give you something like this, and we could tell you, find out how many errors in this one. Where are the problems of this design? Well, look at this report, which it is really reflected the information in the previous report. It is really improved the design of that form. Pine Valley Furniture, page 2 of 2 for navigation, today's date, the indentation, you see it by the date, you see spacing between, these, you see the label, clear, date, purchase, payment, the name, the customer ID number. You see down there are a summary of all these columns. You see there is an exit. If you want to go to the prior screen, there is a help. All the information here, it is really make it easy to use, usable, and will pass, in the assessment test. Well, and when we design a form or report, we need to highlight some important information. The highlight information, it's notify user of errors in data entry or processing, which it is not the main reason. There's a lot of reason for highlighting. Notifying that there are errors exist. Provide warning regarding possible problems. Draw attention to keywords, command, high priority message, unusual data values. That's, when we work now in a form, in a report, in a form, which it is, like a screen when you write a program. And then when there is a message, when there is a warning to the customer, I think you should really probably use a different color for that message, because it should really pop up in his face, different color. I mean, the color, most of the color, like if we use it like a black or a blue, I think the error message, it should appear like in red to notify the user that, hey, there is a problem, and he could look at it and find out if there is a problem, he face in that screen. Well, highlighting, you could really highlight things in many different ways. You could use uppercase, but don't use it for the whole paragraph. You could use it for one word. You could use it bold or italics, but I mean for one word or two words or whatever. That's what you have. Underscore, underlining, boxing within a box, size and color difference. You could use really the color. The color, very important, and you should use, when you use the color, you should use really the contrast. اختلاف بالكلر. ضدان لما استجمعا حسنا والضد يظهر حسنه الضد. All capital letters. Well, it is the same, as uppercase or whatever. Blinking. Reverse video. Audible tone. A little tone, when you do a problem, and that's why you see it sometimes in the keyboard. If you go and press the wrong key, it will give you a tone, an audible tone. Intensify difference or intensity differences. The intense between, this paragraph and that paragraph or whatever. Offsetting non-standard information. So there are many different ways to highlight the information you want to highlight it in the forms or the report. Well, this slide will show you some of the highlighting information, in the report. We just saw it before. You look at the font size intensity in the Pine Valley Furniture. You look at all capitals letter, like current balance, payment, purchase, date. You see the intensity differences in the totaling when you total these, and the boxing. You look at those, all of them, like it's in one box, all of them indented with the same thing in order. So that's what really, some of the highlighting you could see it. And then the rest of them, which it is the information there, like, the information for January 2014, etc., etc. It's a regular font, and no difference between all these. But when you look at the way we highlight in bold, we highlight in capitals, the intensity of the font size, and the boxing. Well, one technique we use, in highlighting is really the color. But I think you should be careful when you use the color. I think there are some, guideline or some ways, when you want to use them. Because if you mix the wrong colors, if there is no contrast between the colors, as we said, the color, it appears really clear when there is a contrast between, like, the background and the thing really you're putting there, which it is the two different things. So الشاعر العربي قال long time ago: ضدان لما استجمع حسنا والضد يظهر حسنه الضد. الوجه مثل الصبح مبيض والشعر مثل الليل مسود. So the color, probably it is one of the important technique to use in highlighting things. The color, it soothes or strike the eye. Either make it easy in the eye when it is really there is a contrast, or it's really strike it. It is really strong in the eye. Accent or an interesting display. Facilitate subtle discrimination in complex display. Emphasizes the logical organization of information. Draws attention to warnings. Evoke more emotional reaction. But as we said, really, when we use it, I think you have to use it if really there is contrast. The background, the white, it goes with it, probably black, the best way. Finally, in this lecture, colors versus color. Problems we may face using color. As we said, I think you should be careful when you use the color in highlighting. Color pairing may wash out or cause problem for some user. If you use the wrong color, if there is no contrast, whatever, it probably will backfire. Resolution may degrade with different displays. The resolution, it's not clear. That's why when you use the wrong color, as we say, some of our students, they like the color. They put the background like, a red, and the text probably in a blue or in an orange. It will degrade the resolution here. Color fidelity may degrade on different displays. Printing or conversion to other media may not easily translate. And that's what the thing really, that's the important thing here. Because the resolution and the screen, it is much better than the printer. So you could see it clear on the screen. And that is really important, actually, in everything. Even in your format, in your project. You could see it clear with color or even without color. Without red or whatever. At the color, the normal color, you use it in your letters, whatever. When you print it, then you see it different. Why? Because the resolution of the printer, it is much less than quality, less than in the resolution of the screen. So you see it, that's why you say, well, I think it's clear, it was clear really in the Word, but when you print it, that's what. So you should be careful on this. By this, we finished the first lecture on designing forms and report. And next time we'll cover the rest of the chapter in lecture 2. Thanks and see you.